And usually, multicellular organisms, they grow by dividing their cells. So reproduction is nothing but the ability of an organism to produce a offspring. So increase in cell number is usually seen in unicellular organisms. Seeds usually germinate very well in the dark rather than keeping them in the light. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to today's session on chapter 1, that is the living world. I'm Dr. Divya, biology faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru, Temple of Excellence. Our world is very beautiful and we are happy to live in it, right? There is a vast variety or diversity of living organisms that are present in this world, which are beautiful in color, in their shape, their structure, their size and whatnot. And every day, new such forms of life or organisms are being discovered by the scientists. So organisms are said to be living because of certain characteristics. So if an organism can be called as something that is living, we should know what is living. So what is living? Something or an organism can be considered to be living if it has a few characteristics. So what are the characteristics? They should show the ability to grow. They should have the capability to reproduce so that the next generation or set of organisms can come into this earth. And next is they have the ability to self-replicate. So reproduction is the ability of multicellular organisms. Replication is the ability of unicellular organism wherein they increase their number by replicating. Also, one more thing, the organisms, they are said to be living if they can self-organize. And also, if they are able to interact and emerge themselves out of all odds in this environment or in this particular world. So what is living? Something can be considered to be living by looking at the characteristic features such as growth, reproduction ability, the ability to self-replicate, to self-organize, interact, and to finally emerge as successful organisms. So we shall see these different aspects or characteristics that helps us to consider an organism or something to be living. So the first characteristic is growth. So growth is nothing but the increase in mass and the number of individuals. So increase in mass. Mass is nothing but a group of something, right? So a group of organism you can call a mass. A group of people, you call it a mass. A group of cells, a mass which forms a tissue. So increase in mass. So the term increase in mass can be referred to the size of an organism. So we can take the best example of we human beings. So as soon as a baby is born, it is very, very small. But as it grows, it increases its mass. That is, there is growth. You can observe growth in that particular organism. So that is one of the characteristics of growth. And also the number of individuals. So the individuals also increase. So especially when you consider the microorganisms, when they reproduce, they replicate or they multiply in numbers. So one microorganism, they will multiply and they will give rise to 2. Again like this, they will multiply and they keep on multiplying and forms groups. So this is nothing but again increase in the number of individuals. So growth is nothing but the increase in mass and also the increase in number of individuals. And usually multicellular organisms, they grow by dividing their cells. So that is how the increase in mass takes place. So we know that the animal or a human fetus or be it the plant, it always starts with a single cell. And that cell divides and multiplies to form a number of cells which can be later called as the embryo, the fetus, and therefore a child and an adult. That is how they increase their mass or they multicellular organisms, that is how they grow, by dividing their cells. When it comes to unicellular organisms, they grow by increasing their numbers. Do plants and animals increase their numbers? No, they reproduce, right? Wherein the fertilization process will take place and after that they produce a new offspring. But in the case of microbes, they do not increase their mass, but instead they increase their cell number. Wherein I told you, the bacteria, they multiply by replicating themselves, by producing a lot of different copies, thousands of copies of themselves. So that is nothing but that is increasing their numbers. So multicellular organisms, they grow by dividing their cells. That is one cell. It divides to form 2 cells. Again, this divides to form 4 cells. So this is how the mass of the cell will increase. The size of the cell increases in the case of multicellular organisms. We grow by mass, whereas unicellular organisms such as the bacteria, fungi, they grow by increasing their numbers. So bacteria and fungi, what they do is, one bacteria, again 2 more, again 4 more. This is how they increase their numbers. So unicellular organisms, they grow by increasing their numbers. And there is a difference between the growth in the plants and in the animals or we human beings. We grow, or the animals grow up to a certain time. Our growth is not continuous. Till we die, do we grow? No, we do not. After a certain age, we stop growing. But in the case of plants, the plants tend to grow continuously throughout their death. So sometimes the root will grow continuously, sometimes the plant itself until it dies, it will keep on growing, the stem girdle will increase, the girdle size of the stem will increase, all that. So growth in plants, it is continuous, whereas in animals, it is only to a certain age. After that, the growth in animals stops. But until senescence or until the death of the plant, they continue to grow. And cell division also occurs during cell death. So it is not just the cells tend, even if a plant or an animal die, the cells tend to divide. But still, in spite of that, it cannot be considered a growth. Growth is something, or you cannot consider the cell living in spite of the cells being dead. So in dead organisms, what happens is the cells will divide to a certain time. But you cannot call it as growth. Why? Because the organism is dead. So there is a slight difference between the cell division in a living organism can be considered a growth, but the cell division in a dead organism cannot be considered a growth. So that is the difference. Next important characteristics that can be considered for an organism to be called as living, it is reproduction. So reproduction is nothing but the ability of an organism to produce a offspring. So animals, plants, we human beings, we all reproduce, right? Just like that, the unicellular organisms, that is the fungi, bacteria, and all different sorts of microbes, they also reproduce. So reproduction, it is the production of offspring that are more or less similar to the parent. They look exactly like clones of the parent. They look more or similar like that of the parent. And when reproduction is considered, there are 2 types of reproduction. One is sexual type of reproduction and the other one is asexual type of reproduction. And we already learned in the previous slide that reproduction is one of the factors wherein we can say that the organism is living. So, if an organism is capable of reproducing, then we can consider the organism to be living. So, under the different types of reproduction, we shall see about sexual reproduction. So, sexual reproduction, it occurs in multicellular organisms, and here the parents, they produce offsprings that are almost exactly similar to the parents. So, the progeny looks almost similar to the parents. So, that is one of the important characteristics of sexual reproduction. So, sexual reproduction, it occurs in multicellular organisms and the parents, they produce progeny which are almost similar to them. So moving on to asexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction is nothing but here the fusion of the gametes, that is the male and the female gamete, will not take place, but instead a different form of reproduction will occur which is called as asexual, wherein in the case of fungi they usually produce spores. So you might have seen the best example is penicillium or aspergillus. So if I'll draw aspergillus. So aspergillus, they usually produce spores. So they produce conidia. These conidia later liberates thousands of small spores. So this is nothing but asexual reproduction. And these spores, they again develop into the adult aspergillus or the adult fungi. So that is how asexual reproduction takes place. That is production of asexual spores. Here, male gamete and female gamete are not involved in the reproduction. There is no fertilization taking place, but instead they produce large amounts of spores, and those spores later on develop into the adults. There are few examples that I can give you under asexual reproduction. One is budding. So budding is usually seen in yeast and hydra. So yeast is a unicellular organism. So the budding is seen in unicellular organism yeast, and it is also seen in hydra. So yeast, how do they bud? So what is a bud? It is nothing but an outgrowth which is already attached to the parent body. So for example, in yeast, we have yeast cell like this. So once the yeast matures in the parent body, a bud will be produced. So this is how a bud will be produced. So this bud, again, it will get separated and it will form a separate organism. So this is the parent and this is the offspring that is produced. So again here, no fertilization, there is no involvement of the male and the female gamete, but in the yeast cell itself, a small outgrowth or bud is produced. That bud will later separate from the parent and it will develop into a new organism. So that is how budding occurs in yeast. Similarly, in hydra also budding will appear. So what happens is, so here if you have hydra, again here a small outgrowth will be produced, and this outgrowth will later on separate itself from the parent and it will produce a new plant. So this is nothing but again budding in hydra. So similarly, this is how budding occurs in yeast as well as in hydra. Next is fragmentation. So what is fragmentation? So a portion of the body of an organism will get cut into small fragments, and each fragment will separately form a new individual. Say for example, we have a algae. So this is the algal body. So one small portion may get cut. If it is cut, it will develop into a new algal body. So that is nothing but fragmentation. So different fragments in the body. So different fragments in the body. One portion of the fragment, if it is cut, it will develop into a new organism. So that is nothing but fragmentation. So fragmentation is usually seen in algae and in mosses. Next is regeneration. So there is a minute difference between fragmentation and regeneration. In fragmentation, a portion of the body that is cut, or if the organism is cut into different fragments, each fragment develops into a new individual organism. In the case of regeneration, if a small portion, so the best example for regeneration is, you might have seen lizards in your house, right? And we are all scared of lizards. So when we start screaming and running around when we see a lizard, in order to distract us, what the lizard will do? It will leave its tail and it will run. But do you think the tail of the lizard will remain just like that? No, the lizard will regrow its tail, right? So that is nothing but regeneration. Here, the tail will not grow into a lizard. The whole body of the lizard will not develop from a tail, but the lizard which has a cut tail, from that new tail will come up. So that is regeneration. In this case, any number of fragments it is cut, each fragment will develop into a new organism. So I hope you have understood. But in the case of regeneration, what happens? Lizard. So the tail is one side, it has left the tail, and the lizard is separate. It has become separate. So the lizard, that is, it will grow the tail. But will the tail grow the whole body of the lizard? No. So that is the difference between fragmentation and regeneration. So the best example is planaria. So in planaria, what happens? Say for example, there is a small portion that is cut here and it got removed. So the planaria, again, it will develop into a new organism as such. It will regrow. It will regrow again. So this portion, if it is cut, again it will regrow. So that is nothing but regeneration in planaria. So planaria, the body, the tail part is cut. In spite of the tail part from planaria being cut, the planaria body will develop a new tail again. So that is nothing but regeneration. Next is increase in cell number. So increase in cell number is usually seen in unicellular organisms such as bacteria, unicellular algae and amoeba. Here, as I told you, they usually reproduce wherein by increasing the cell number. One bacteria will multiply to become 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16. It will continue like that. So that is nothing but increase in cell number. The different forms of asexual reproduction are budding, fragmentation, regeneration and increase in cell number. So this is also one of the characteristic feature to say that the organism is living. Next important characteristic is metabolism. So reproduction and growth cannot be exactly considered to say that an organism is living. So apart from that, there are two important points that strongly proves that an organism is living. That is metabolism and one more is sensing the environment. So these two are the process that actually says that an organism is considered to be living. Why? Because growth, even a mountain can grow, right? Even a rock can grow. But in spite of that, can you say they are living? Is the mountain living? Is the rock living? No, they are non-living things, right? So that is why growth cannot be the only criteria for living. And reproduction also. Some organisms, they may not reproduce at all, especially in human beings. Because of certain reasons, they may not be able to reproduce. But still, can you say because they are not reproducing, they are dead? No, we cannot say that, right? So therefore, the two criteria, growth and reproduction, is not actually the correct terms to consider an organism to be living. But these two, that is metabolism and the ability to sense the environment, is the two important things that we can consider to say that an organism is living. So we shall see what metabolism is. So metabolism, in easy terms, I can call it as digestion. So you eat a food, that food gets digested and that is supplied to different parts of the body in the form of energy. And that energy you utilize to perform various functions and work, right? So the process of conversion of what we eat or drink into energy is called as metabolism. And for the metabolism or for the metabolic reaction or for the digestion to occur, various digestive enzymes that are present in our mouth as well as in our digestive system plays a very important role. So if an organism is eating food, digesting it and utilizing it and eliminating a part of it, then we can consider that particular organism to be living. So there are two important examples. One is photosynthesis. So photosynthesis in plants. So what plants do? They utilize the energy from the sunlight. That energy gets converted into food and that food is traveled or circulated to different parts of the plant body for its survival and growth. And in animals, digestion is one of the important metabolic activity. The food we eat it gets digested, and that gets supplied to different parts of our body in the form of energy so that we can do our daily activity. So if these two processes, that is photosynthesis and digestion, occurs, then we can consider that particular organism to be living. So therefore, metabolism is one of the important characteristics to say that an organism is living. Next is ability to sense the surrounding. So we all are cautious every day, right? When you're walking, you're conscious. Or if a car, when you're walking on the road and you notice a car speeding, then you stop crossing the road. Why? Because you're able to sense, you're able to see that the car is speeding, I should not cross the road. So you're sensing it. So any organism that has the ability to sense, say for example, you're thirsty, you're able to sense that you're thirsty, you need water. So it is a sense. You're able to smell, you're able to wear a sweater. So you run, search in your cupboard for sweater and you wear your sweater if the temperature drops, right? To keep yourself warm. Or else what happens if you didn't have the sense that it is cold, you would die, right? We all will die because if we lose our sense, we'll not be able. So we'll not know that the temperature is cold, I have to run and wear a sweater, or I have to keep myself warm. What will happen? Our body, the functioning, the circulation and all that is taking place in the body will get hindered, and therefore it will result in death. So therefore the ability to sense whatever is happening in the environment, it is very, very important. It is also called as consciousness. We are being conscious of things. And so therefore, responding to environmental stimuli such as be it physical stimuli, be it chemical and biological stimuli, it is called as ability to sense. It is the important criteria for living. So if an organism can sense or be cautious of his surroundings, then he or the organism or that particular individual is considered to be living. So animals, they sense the environment using their sense organs. Ear, we have ears, we can hear, we can sense sound. We have nose, we can sense smell. We have eyelids. So eyelids, when somebody is coming to hit you, or when you sense that something is going to enter your eyes, your eyelid will just close automatically without you knowing. Just in a second, in a click, it will close. Why? Because your capability of sensing something, sensing the danger. Like this, animals, they sense the environment using sense organs, and plants, they are able to sense light. The best example I'll tell you. You take a pot of plant and you cover it with a cardboard and just make a small hole through which the light can enter. After a few days, after a week or after 2 weeks, if you remove the box, you can see that the plant would have bent towards the hole. Why? Because the plant is sensing the light. It is bending towards light so that it can grow well. That is nothing but the ability to sense. So plants, they sense the light, they can sense water. So cactus, they have very long roots when compared to other plants, because cactus in the desert, the water availability is very less. So until they get water in the underground, the roots keep on growing in cactus. So in order to sense water, they can sense water, they can sense temperature. The best is closing and opening of stomata. So when there is very high temperature, the stomata usually tends to close so that the water, whatever is there in the plant, will not be lost. The plant will not be harmed. So that is nothing but sensing of temperature, and also they are able to sense other organisms and pollutants. So microbes, plants are able to sense microbes. So plant, what happens is, what we do, coronavirus, what we do nowadays, we put a mask. Right? We know that coronavirus is there somewhere in the environment. We need to protect ourselves. So we put a mask. But can plants run and put a mask? No, right? What happens in plants is, whenever there is a pathogen or a disease occurring in the plant, certain chemical compounds that are there in the plants, it will start producing or increase in the production. It will start increase in the production. So when it increases in the production, it will those compounds will have the ability to kill that particular pathogen. That is how they sense. And also they are able to sense the pollutants in the environment. And also there are certain photoperiod that affects the reproduction in animals and plants. So photoperiod is nothing but the light, the duration of the light, the daylight as well as the night. So the duration of the light, that is nothing but photoperiod. So that also plays a very important. So plants can sense, especially I can talk about germination of seeds. Seeds usually germinate very well in the dark rather than keeping them in the light. That is why it is usually whenever your mother, she puts horse gram so that she can prepare a curry the next day so that it will sprout. What will she do? She'll either keep it in a dark place, or she'll tie and keep a cloth so that it will be damp as well as there will be darkness. Why? Because sprouting or germination of the seeds takes place very well in the dark. So these are nothing but, all these are the ability of the plants and the animals to sense the environment. So if a plant or an animal or if any individual or an organism is capable of being conscious or capable of sensing the environment, then they can be considered to be living. So now we know that there are a vast variety of organisms living in a planet. So it is always confusing when we say like plants. Again, in plants, there are a lot of organisms. Again, in animals, there are a lot of different types of animals. In microbes, there are a lot of different types of microbes. It is difficult to distinguish between them. Say, for example, I'll give you a best example. Okay, the Kannada speaking people, they call coconut as Tenginakai. So you go to some other country, or you go to France, wherein majority of the people are speaking French. You go and ask them, give me Tenginakai, will they understand? No, because it is a local language that you are using. So they will not understand what you are asking for. So in order to avoid such confusions, scientists, they have given names to the organisms, and that naming of an organism is called as nomenclature. So we shall study what nomenclature is. So now we know that living organisms, what are the characteristics of living organisms. Once you understand the characteristics of living organisms, you should start to give them a name so that throughout the world everybody can understand what you're asking for or what you're telling. So that is nothing but nomenclature. So as I told you, there are a variety of living organisms that are present in this planet, and there is a vast in each biodiversity, the type of species that is there, all that keeps on varying, and there is a diverse plants and animals that are given different local names. So these diverse plants and animals are called in different local names by the people. The best example I can give you, mango. So we all know what mango is. So somebody who doesn't know the English term mango, a Kannada speaking person, if he goes to another state, say for example, if he goes to Delhi and asks, I need Mavina Hannu, will they understand? No, because there it will be called as Am, right? If a Kannada person goes to Kerala and says, give me Mavina Hannu, will he understand? No. Why? In Kerala it is called Manga. It is called Manga, right? It is different. So these local names actually create a confusion when it comes to speaking. Like how English is one of the universal language, like almost most of the people understand, and it is one of the language that brings countries together. Likewise, scientists, what they believed was there should be a scientific naming that should be given to the plants and the animals so that people can easily understand. So that is when they came into one procedure called as nomenclature. So to avoid all this confusion, nomenclature was introduced. So nomenclature, so you might think, okay, I myself will give one scientific name. No, that cannot be done. There is a committee which is called as International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. It is called as ICBN, International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. That particular committee, International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, in the case of plants, and for animals, International Code for Zoological Nomenclature. Whatever the people belonging to this particular committee have decided, according to that, the naming has to be given to the animal or the plant. So we shall see what are the different criteria or the principles or the rules that have to be followed when naming an animal or a plant. So whenever a scientific name is given to an animal or a plant, make sure that only one name is used. Say for example, coconut, Cocos nucifera. The name Cocos nucifera should be used throughout the country, throughout the world. It is not like in India it is called Cocos nucifera. In some other part of the world it is called as some other name. No. Whenever the scientific name is given, that one single scientific name should be used by throughout the world, people throughout the world. So only one name should be given, and the name that is given should not be used or repeated. Say for example, I say the coconut and the arecanut belongs to the same family, but the name of coconut, so you might think, okay, coconut and arecanut plant almost looks the same, so both also I'll call them as Cocos nucifera. No, that is wrong. It will again create a confusion. Coconut will be called Cocos nucifera, arecanut will be called Areca catachu. The name is different. So what it means is that only one single name should be given to that particular plant or that particular animal. Say for example, you have two babies in a house. So will you name both the baby Ram? Will you name both the baby Sita? No, right? One may be called Ram, the other may be called Lakshman. You'll give different names to avoid confusion. So that is why, to avoid confusion about the names of the plants and animals throughout the world, the scientific name should not be used more than one time. That is, it should not be repeated. Next is, the scientific name should always be based on the description of the organism. So it should always be based on the description of the organism. So something that describes the organism. So that is why scientific name should always be based on the description. Maybe it may be named based on the color of the organism, maybe based on the person who found that organism for the first time, maybe based on the morphology of the organism. Like that it should be named. And the scientific name should always have two different words. That is, it should be made up of two components. It should always be made of two components. So the first component will be called as the generic name, and the second component will be called as the specific epithet. So this is very important. So binomial nomenclature, so far that we studied, all the credit goes to Carolus Linnaeus. So Carolus Linnaeus, he is the first person to say it is very difficult if we don't follow a standard procedure of naming the plants and the animals or the microorganisms. It will create a lot of confusion. So therefore, we should go in for naming or giving a scientific name to an organism, which is called as binomial nomenclature. So the best example I can show you here is Mangifera indica. So I told you binomial nomenclature. Binomial, nomial means naming, by two. You're giving two names to an organism. One organism will have one name itself, but the name will divide into two components. What are the two components? The first component is the generic name, and the second component is the specific epithet. That is why it is called as binomial. Say for example, here this is mango. The local name is mango that we use. So mango, it is called as Mavinakai, Mavina Hannu, Manga, then we call it as like different names are there, local names are there. So in order to avoid confusion, they have scientifically named it as Mangifera indica. So here you can see there are some rules that you have to follow. Two different names. Two words are there. Mangifera is separate, indica. So indica is something, because mango, it is from India. That is why they have named it as indica. India is the origin of mango. Mango originated in India. That is why it is named as indica. And remember, I told you it should be based on the description of the organism. Here, what is the description they have given? Mango originated in India. That is why they have called it as indica, Mangifera indica. So Mangifera indica, something that belongs to India. That is why they have called it as indica, Mangifera indica. And it is made up of two words. One is the generic name, and the other one is the specific epithet. Together they are called as the binomial nomenclature. The best example is, I told you, plant should be based on, the naming should be given, or the scientific naming should be given based on the description of the organism. So we will consider periwinkle. So periwinkle is nothing but the Nitya Pushpa or the Sada Pushpa that you call, which is scientifically called as Vinca rosea. So Vinca means periwinkle. Vinca means periwinkle. Vinca means periwinkle, and rosea means rose color or pink color. Rose color or pink color. So Vinca rosea, you all have seen, it is usually either somewhat purple to pink in color, right? So that is why based on that they have given as Vinca rosea. Vinca means periwinkle and rosea means rosa. Rosa, that is something which belongs to the color of the rose, either pink or purple color. So these are the criteria that should be followed for binomial nomenclature. And apart from that, there are certain universal rules that have been put forth which a person should follow whenever giving a scientific name. What are the rules? We shall see. Always the scientific names should be in Latin, because Carolus Linnaeus, he was a Latin. So what trend or what he followed, that is giving Latin names, naming the plants or the animals or the microbes in Latin, the same thing got continued. So whatever names you give, it should always be in Latin. So I told you periwinkle is Vinca means periwinkle in Latin, and rosea means rose color or pink or purple color in Latin. Therefore, they should always be in Latin, and it should always be in italics. So italic, it is a font which has a slight slant. So it should always be in italic. So when you type, you can give the font in italics. But when you write, you can't write it in italics. So what you have to do is, so say for example, we have Mangifera indica. Here Mangifera, you can underline it separate, indica you can underline it separate. So if it is not possible to write it in italics, you can separately underline it. And one more is, the first word will be the genus or the generic name, and the second word will be the specific epithet. So here the first word is the genus, and the second word, it is the specific epithet. And when handwriting, the names should be underlined separately. That is what I have done here. When handwriting, you have to separately underline the names. And the first word should always start with the capital. Can you see here? The first word here always starts with the capital, and the second word should always start with a small letter. So the second word should always start with a small letter. First word in capital, and the second word should always start in a small letter. So first word starts with capital, and the second starts with small letter. And the author name should always be written after the specific epithet. So you can see here, I'll just explain once again. Mangifera, I've underlined it separately. That is, when you're handwriting, you can underline it separately. And always the generic name, that is the first word, should start with the capital, and the specific epithet, that is the second word, it should start with the small letter. And the author's name, that is Carolus Linnaeus. You have to pay tribute to the author. He was the first person to name mango as Mangifera indica. Therefore, you have to give credit to him. So, it is written in abbreviation. LINN stands for Linnaeus. So, LINN dot. So, the author name should be written after the specific epithet. It is written after the specific epithet, and it should be abbreviated. So, instead of writing AEUS, Linnaeus, I've abbreviated it as LINN. And whenever there is an abbreviation, it is a continuation of something. So you have to put a dot here. So that is how the naming is actually done. So these are the rules that you have to follow for binomial nomenclature. So I hope you have understood this chapter well. In the next coming session, we shall discuss how the organisms are classified, what are the different taxa that are followed for the classification of organisms. So we shall meet in the next coming session. Thank you.